Good evening. Our top story this week. The Russians are all upset and are accusing the United States of not taking the safety of kids seriously after the death of an adopted Russian orphan in Texas is ruled to have been an accident. Texas authorities are denying the accuracy of statements made by the Russian Children's Ombudsman, claiming that Texas CPS agent said that the boy's mother is responsible for his death. The agency that handled the investigation is being investigated by Texas licensing officials to make sure minimum standards were met in the case, and the Russian Children's Ombudsman is suggesting setting up a register of Russian orphans who are adopted by American parents because the U.S. government isn't taking the safety of these kids seriously. Connecticut lawmakers are considering allowing the child protective industry to create a task force that would regulate video games in arcades and ban shooting games, all in wake of the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting back in December. Parents who are ranting and raving on Facebook are beginning to lose custody of their children in divorce and child protection proceedings. In California, the Los Angeles CPS boss is upset with how slow the progress has been in regards to the goal of getting it right, and foster care advocates are demanding more oversight on how California's stolen children are entering the system. In Florida, a lawmaker is trying to deal with a rash of double reports which ties up the phone lines thanks to a side effect of a law that requires everybody to report every little thing. In Oregon, kids are growing up in foster care because they can't figure out anything better to do with them. In Colorado, foster parents are giving more rights and power in the important court hearings regarding the real parents' rights of the kids they are caring for. In Colorado's foster kids are being targeted by sex traffickers who are preying on them when they run away or become homeless after aging out at the age of 18. Mississippi's foster care system remains unacceptable as one kid had been bounced around between 28 different foster homes, mental institutions, and temporary shelters by the time he was 17, after being threatened with snarling dogs in one foster home when he was at age 4. Minnesota lawmakers are considering a bill that would restore parental rights in cases where the child protective industry fails to provide any better permanency options for the child before they age out of the system. And Minnesota's child protective industry is considering creating a child care fraud department after a daycare business is accused of committing massive fraud by billing for kids at times when they weren't even there. In Pennsylvania, child advocates are calling for reforms to the state's child welfare system, which they say isn't doing enough to protect children. In Utah, lawmakers are looking for ways to cut down on adoption fraud in the state. Utah is spending about $153 million a year on child abuse investigations, 65% of which are determined to be unfounded. And the state of Virginia considers adding a conscience clause to their adoption laws, which would give faith-based adoption agencies the right to turn away potential adoptive couples based on sexual orientation or religious and moral beliefs. In China, 7 children have frozen to death over the last 4 months at an orphanage. In India, a child returns home to an emotional reunion 6 months after being snatched by CPS agents in New Jersey. And child abuse is on the rise in Indian orphanages. In Ireland, all state child welfare services are facing an inspection to ensure that they are providing adequate care to vulnerable children. Irish child welfare agencies are in need of more public scrutiny anyway because with so little transparency, flaws in the system are often swept under the rug. And Irish foster kids are finally being removed from unsuitable foster parents. In Australia, an Indigenous community member is calling for a restructuring of the way the Department of Child Protection makes decisions about child placements. Australian CPS agents are claiming that a blame culture is being created when society demands that somebody be held accountable when a child is failed by their parents, as well as an expectation that the state intervene. And Prime Minister Julia Gillard is going to apologize to the victims of forced adoption. In Canada, the National Chief of the Assembly of First Nations told the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal that underfunded Aboriginal child welfare agencies are reminiscent of the residential school era. And a lawyer is confident that Canadian Aboriginal child welfare cases will show systematic discrimination because the government is not providing the same services that would be afforded to children of other races, and therefore leaving the only solution as removal from the family. In England, the Justice Ministry is under pressure to curb attacks on family court judges who are pissing parents off during child custody battles. A damning report on child protection is expecting to give Northamptonshire Council the lowest possible rating during a watchdog inspection. A British politician is saying sorry for saying that disabled children cost the council too much money and should be put down. And a British kid blows $2,500 on in-game purchases in his mother's iPad in no more than 10 minutes. And a British judge lifts a ban on a journalist who wanted to report on a family court case, saying that secrecy in the court is not in the public's best interest. In entertainment news this week, a former foster child who made it to Miss Teen Delaware, USA resigns after a porn video of a girl who looks just like her surfaces. In Ohio, an adoptive father gets 50 years in jail for raping the kids in his care. In South Carolina, 2 people are indicted for the unlawful access and use of confidential records from the South Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. In New York, a foster home is being investigated for fraud. And in Texas, 2 women are found guilty of kidnapping a boy and hiding him for 8 years before he spent a year in foster care before being reunited with his siblings. In Utah, a foster mother who failed to receive the proper screenings is now accused of brutal child abuse. In Virginia Beach, Virginia, the child protective industry is ordered to pay $450,000 as a settlement for a kid who died while in the care of foster parents. And in Maine, the competency hearing of an 11-year-old girl who was charged with manslaughter in the death of a baby is set. In Massachusetts, a 9-year-old boy's rap video is sparking a child abuse investigation because someone feels that his slapping a woman's ass in his music video is sexual exploitation. The father's lawyer is blasting that decision because the kid is thriving in his home, doing well in school, and is not abused or neglected in any way. And finally, tonight in Kentucky, a mother is charged with wanton endangerment, obstructing government operations, and terroristic threatening for refusing to happily hand over her baby to CPS agents despite a court order. For these stories and all the latest dirt on the child protective industry, visit www.legallykidnapped.com. And until next week, this is Baby LK, over and out.